Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 70. You going abroad? Do you speak the language? We talked about this before. Of course you should. However, today's guest will tell us a lot of companies don't think about this. And we're going here to find out why. Why is nobody thinking about this? Stay tuned.
Well, hello.
Well, hello. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday.
So, how have you been? How was your week, Brett?
Fantastic. It's still fantastic. It's not over. It's only just the beginning. It's only just the beginning.
The beginning of a wonderful weekend, maybe.
Absolutely.
So, I teased it a little bit because we talked about language, foreign language acquisition here before amongst the two of us. And when we did, we agreed that it would be smart to have somebody here who does this for a living to bring people who work in a global environment up to par, or at least up to speed when it comes to speaking the language of a host culture or of a nation slash culture, maybe that you're spending most of your work time with. And let's hear her, because I think the one thing I gave away in the intro is that too many companies make this an afterthought. They don't plan this strategically. And with us today is Micah, who runs a language learning company in Dallas, Texas, and she can tell us how this stuff ought to work. Welcome to Two Chaps, Many Cultures, Micah. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
And I deliberately did not pronounce your last name because we did this before and I screwed it up, so I'm going to let you do it.
Bell, you.
Ah.
There we go.
Bell.
You're not the only one who avoids my last name. It's perfectly all right.
Now, you just gave us a great example of how you visualize language learning. So you gave us a little cue here. Is this a method that has been tested and is trusted?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In our kids' classes, we always say you have to have some kind of emotion to everything you say. And so you have to connect it. Mm-hmm.
So tell our audience what your company Fluency Corp does. So you train kids and adults, and what's the distinction and how does this work?
Absolutely. So we work with global corporations that are moving their employees, and the employees often have families, to other countries. And so when those families get moved to another country, oftentimes they do not know the language, or they have a beginner or low intermediate level of the language. And so to be able to have a successful relocation, one would hope they can fit in, assimilate, have a nice life there, and be able to make friends. And of course, for the company, work successfully, right?
Right. And in your experience, because you and I had this conversation many times over, in your experience, how serious do employers take the language gap? Do they strategically approach this, or is this often more an afterthought? Oops, John Smith doesn't speak Spanish. We got to do something about it.
I believe oftentimes it is an afterthought, although, we do have a handful of clients that make it a priority. And I think it's really interesting how successful they are in the new countries. We have some clients that say everyone in the company gets to take private language lessons for wherever they're going. And then the people in the country where they're opening that new branch gets to take, because it's a Spanish company, gets to take Spanish lessons to be able to relate to their employer better. So they take it to a whole new level. And then we have some others that will say, oh yeah, we're moving this family to Russia next week. Maybe we should start Russian lessons. And that can be a little frustrating because I want to prep them, you know, Global Fluency Corp wants to prep them starting a year in advance, and they knew they were going, you know?
So that would have been my next question. What would be the ideal time frame? When would you ideally begin with language instruction when you're about to embark on a foreign assignment?
I actually think that is the biggest challenge for the corporations. It's not that they're putting language last on the list. I think it's that most of them have about 5 to 6 months lead time on getting these assignments and moving. And, you know, when you have kids and you have a spouse that is saying maybe, what about my job? How am I going to work in Russia, for example? And how are the kids? Where are they going to go to school? And how are they going to come back to school in 5 years? I think those are such pressing needs for the family that it just gets, you know, to the bottom of the list. But as soon as you can is always my question. But it also depends on the goal. It depends on the goal, right? If they're going to live in an expat community and they're really just going to be in a bubble, maybe it's not as big of a thing if they're going to be working in the local language extensively. So I always ask that of clients first. Tell me your goals first, and I'll tell you how to reach them.
So when you say when you notice that they are going to live in a bubble, that gets all the hair and my neck standing up. And I know I'm opinionated about this. So when you recognize this in future expats that their plans or their intentions are to stay amongst their cultural peers and not venture out, is that something that makes you work harder? Because if you're trying to teach them something new that would help them break out of the bubble, is there resistance? Oh,
incredible resistance. Absolutely. I'll quote one of my, we had a Korean client, a company, and every time at lunch, we tell them, you know, you can get a free English lesson if you sit with your American colleagues at lunch. You know, you can get all the idioms and the regular speech and, you know, and it's free. And he said, I speak English all day. At lunch, I just want to rest. And he, you know, so we go into that corporate lunchroom and we see all the Koreans together, all the Americans together, you know. And so there's huge resistance, you know, and after years, I'll ask families, you know, they're leaving now, 3 years in the US or 3 years in Russia, wherever it is, you know, did you make any Russian friends there? Or did you make any American friends here? And they're like, they just stuck with their own. It's hard. It's human nature. But we do, that's one of the assimilation sides of our language training. We actually added a little thing over the last 2 months, language training and assimilation. And we're really, really pushing that as 25% of our program, which is that, you know, pushing them to eat lunch, pushing them to join the PTA. Now, this is just an American example, but get involved, basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what would be another example? PTA, Brett, what can you think of? Cricket club, or what else will we do to involve people abroad?
Absolutely. I mean, oftentimes I will suggest if they follow a faith, if they have a faith practice, a church is usually a good place to start because you're getting involved and you're actively engaging with people that maybe speak the local language, and you know, you've got a space there that's kind of familiar to you. If you have the familiarity of the faith practice, but you have also the to expand it into the language as well. That's another place I would suggest as well. Yeah.
Great example. Great suggestion.
So, Micah, how do you administer language education to adults, to professionals who have hectic day-to-days and who are under the additional pressure of getting ready for or being in the middle of a global work project? How do you, as a service provider, make them to commit? What can you do?
I think that's a really, really good question. And it's interesting that you asked that, because I always say the schedule is the reason the program will be successful or not, because people are so busy, you know. They're trying to nurture their partnerships, you know, with their loved ones. They're being a dad or a mom. I mean, these are huge roles in our lives. You know, learning Russian obviously does not come before being a mom or a dad or a partner.
Right.
And so what I usually try to do, and our project managers are trained in the same way, we really get to know their daily life before anything starts, before we choose an instructor, before we do anything. And, you know, we kind of walk through it. You know, do you go to the gym in the mornings? Do you have a baby you're up with in the middle of the night, was one of our questions lately. So we're trying to find that perfect time of day where they're not going to have to cancel. We know that cancellations and life comes up, but can we find that time of day where it's the very least, you know,
right,
where it's maybe just once a month? And so a lot of people will try to ask for, you know, like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And in our experiences, that is the most cancelable. That's not a word, but it's the time when meetings come up the most and they have to do their job. And so a lot of times counseling them to do 6, 6:30, and 7, because who's going to ask them for a 6:30 meeting? And then it's done, it's over with, you know, and they've committed, like you said. And so our success rate really depends on that amazing schedule. Yeah.
Or they may have a cultural trainer going to be there with them all day. Because this often happens. If my clients will say, well, after you leave, I've got language training. I've got a training. And I kind of say, wow, if you'd have told me that, I probably would have told you not to do it. Because I think they think that sitting all day with someone like me is going to be kind of like an easy process. And we actually get into some really emotional and stressful things. So at the end of the day, then to turn up and have to work with a language trainer can be tough. And I've actually worked with people that do our work that are language trainers, and they suggest this, and they say, you know, you've got to schedule this. This is an intentional thing where you have to be really present, mind and body. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Is there a way, or have you found a good technique to enroll the employers in the scheduling process to make them your ally? After all, they hire you to do this. I mean, obviously, not every corporation is the same. Same with us, Brett and I. We recognize this with different attitudes towards the work we do, cultural training. But I noticed sometimes you can forge a relationship with the employer that helps you create a context for everyone involved that makes it basically non-negotiable that the language instruction will be done and you will schedule it, and it's part of our plan.
I think communication and agreement from the get-go of any program with everyone involved in the program and those working with anyone involved in the program, having that understanding from the very beginning is crucial. When we're working with HR or the learning and development teams for this exact reasons, we request, hey, we would love to have a basic agreement in place that understands that, you know, if someone has a language training, can we really be mindful of that and put that as a priority? And so our first couple of years in business, we saw that people were, you know, having to cancel a lot. And so we started requesting that from the beginning. And that's all it takes, you know, an understanding and communication, because the employees are always going to run to their meeting. They're always going to cancel because they don't want to let their employer down, right?
Right.
But if we have this understanding, they are let off the hook that, yes, we do believe in language, and we need that, because if you don't support the programs you're paying for as an employer, it's a little it's confusing, right? As an employee.
I would agree. How has the pandemic changed the way you go about the the language instruction? I know that you did a lot of one-on-one in person in the past, but you've always done, your organization has always done virtual lessons as well. So how big of a pivot did you have to complete?
Yeah, so I would say before the pandemic, we were about 2% online and 98% in person globally. So our instructors are, going to people's offices in Tokyo, Lithuania, Paris, you name it. And in about 24 hours, as everything was going down, we sent a mass email to all of the instructors and said, we're going online, make it work. The way to do this quickly, the way to turn on a dime is for each of you to find the platform that works best for each of you so that we don't feel this huge difference, because they can't just suddenly have a week without pay, while we're figuring things out. That's not fair either. And so now we are 98% online and 2% in person. Some people are choosing to try that out, very, very small groups and one-on-one people with their teachers. So that's been very interesting, but everyone moved very quickly. I was pleasantly surprised.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah,
Brett,
no,
it was same thing happened on your face.
I'm sorry?
I see a question forming on your face.
No, just a comment. Just obviously the same thing happened in our work, and people had to adapt very quickly. Yeah. And then that brings in a whole set of other mental challenges that everybody, your clients included, are also in this situation. And then, of course, maybe it adds another part to the language part. Maybe you're learning a part of the language that you need to show empathy with, and these kind of things. These would probably, and I know I'm getting down to the nuts and bolts of what you learn, how you learn it, what words to learn, right? Yes, you can order a beer and a sandwich, but when it gets down to actually having maybe an inviting conversation with somebody who doesn't speak they may speak English, but you want to generously show that you're trying, and then to get back to empathetic words. So I guess that would be my question then. What do you say to people when they're just starting? What would they learn first? What's the basics? Is it actual, because I've learned another language, so I'm interested in the approach. My approach was to learn the sounds, because it was forming the letters, or the sounds of the letters, because the language I speak is this one, right? So I have to.
Say it out loud. What is it? What did it say?
This one, 𝙦𝙤𝙤 𝘾𝙝ℎ. So this is this is completely foreign to my tongue, right? So you have a language that has to sound differently. So these are the formations of words. So how much, apart from the words and the spelling and the grammar, how much you get into actually trying to practice the mouthing and the sounds of the words and the letters? That's what I'm interested in.
So that's a really great question. So I won't tell the whole story, but basically I had been in Japanese classes as a young person between 15 and 22. I had been in 2 semesters of Japanese at Boston University. I had been in 3 semesters of French and 8 semesters of Spanish. And I couldn't say anything. And I was irate at the level I had gotten to. And what does any good little entrepreneur do when she's mad about a product? Makes a better one.
Right.
And so I started trying to figure out, why did this fail? This is crazy. My grandmother spoke 5 languages. How in the world was I supposed to follow her footsteps if I had been in over 15 semesters of these classes and I had gotten nowhere? And don't get me wrong, I could say some stuff, but when I took a job in Mexico, I couldn't talk with my coworkers. I couldn't make friends. I mean, I was very stunted, which shouldn't have been. And so, long story short, over the next 3 years, I started taking on clients and formulating the Bellew method, which we have trademarked. And it's all about relevancy. And so the first couple of classes with us, we're asking you, what exactly do you need? What are you using this for? And then, just like you said, Brett, we're starting with speaking, listening from day one. Because no matter where you're at, the boardroom or the grocery store, no one's going to slip you a note to talk with you. Because everything focuses on writing and reading. And, you know, I just had a progress meeting with a Japanese client yesterday. And, you know, he had said to me, oh, I thought we were going to have a book. I want a book. I said, why do you want a book? I'm going to push you. Why do you want a book? He said, well, I said, do you want a book because you've always had a book? And he said, maybe. You know, he does a, yes, I think you're right. I said, do you want a book because you don't want to do the podcasts and the TV and the listening exercises that we're telling you to do? He said, I think so. Yes, books are safe. Books are what we know. Let's fill in the grammar blanks. Let's conjugate the verbs, you know? Mm-hmm. But that does not a conversation make.
Right.
That is not understanding a conference call when everyone has their videos off.
Exactly.
That's painful. And so with the Bellew method, it's all about relevancy. What are you going to be doing with this language? Let's build something exactly for you. And then 99%, of course, if you need help with a presentation and you have to write something, we'll help you writing something. But 99% is what Brett said. We've got to understand the sounds, really hear the sounds, and start from just like we learned our first language. That's how we learned our first language. No one wrote to a 2-year-old, you know? So
no, I don't remember getting written notes. No, I don't remember
exactly.
that.
When you were 2?
You're totally fluent by 5.
Well, but in first grade, I got the note slipped to me. Do you want to go with me? Yes, no.
Check the box. Yes, no. Let me think about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I got those notes.
Well, you know, the other strategy might be do what I do. Produce a human being that speaks the other language fluently and is brought up with it. So my 10-year-old speaks both languages like a native, and she just came back from Poland, and even though she was born in the US, and has learned her Polish here, she has no American accent in Polish, and all the local people. So it really is, and it is very humbling as a father to have a 10-year-old walk around and correct you with everything you say every day, and you know, with grammar and spelling and pronunciation.
Same
so
in
that's
our
a good
house.
way to do it. That'll force her to do it.
She didn't have to learn it; she absorbed it. She soaked it up.
She just lived it, and that's
lived it exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's what I want for my kid.
That's right.
All right.
That's my goal.
Let this be the message for the weekend. Learn the languages, as many as you possibly can. They're a window to other worlds. They're windows to understanding the mindset and the philosophy and the worldviews of those that cohabitate this beautiful planet of ours. So as many languages that you can get your fingers and your tongue and your ears into, the better it might be. Micah, thank you for taking time this Friday morning. Thanks for watching, everybody. 2 chaps, many cultures, 70 episodes. Can you believe it? We'll see you again next week.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Micah. Have a great weekend.
Bye, Brett. Bye, guys.